Hi there, everybody. I am Matt with K15T, and welcome to our live stream where we are going to talk all about bringing guests into Confluence to collaborate with people who might not have a typical Confluence user license. There's so many different things to talk about here, and we're not just going to be talking about the features or functionality, but talking about best practices, talking about policies and procedures you should implement to make this safe for y'all to collaborate, but also for your organization. And also, we really love Confluence admins. We want them to be able to sleep at night. Yeah. Hi, Justin. Nice to have you in the chat. Y'all, if you haven't seen it, there's a live chat because we are live. So please do jump into the chat. If you have a question, please type #question before you write it. That just helps me notice them in the chat. We will be trying to answer all your questions and addressing your comments as we go through. So please throw those in there as soon as they pop into your brain. Also, if I don't answer it right away, I try to hold on to them until they're really relevant. So ask those questions. And if you feel like I'm missing something, feel free to drop it in there again. But jump in there, discuss, do all the things. Also, if you haven't hit the like button, please do. That makes algorithms happy. And we want more people to drop in and join us. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. We create a lot of really fantastic teamwork collection, teamwork graph, Rovo, Confluence, Jira, Loom, maybe someday Trello content. We'll see. So please join us as we continue to learn. And I keep saying we because, y'all, I am joined by the illustrious, I'll go with illustrious, the illustrious Chris Klima. Chris, it's nice to have you on the stream.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being illustrious.
Yeah, I mean, I figured we might as well just start piling on compliments and stuff at this point. Otherwise, I don't know if you're going to keep being my guest on here, so I gotta do something. Also, Chris received a request that we actually have a member of our K15T Pets group join us today. So for the very first time on the live stream, I'm welcoming Victor the rabbit. This is Victor. I'm gonna see if I can give y'all a better look. Victor. Oh boy. He's really giving you. So it's hot here. I don't know if you can tell. Victor is roasting right now. So this is a very rare and special sight indeed. This is the fabled rabbit tummy that no human is allowed to touch, but every human wants to. So there is Victor. Victor will be joining us throughout. If you're feeling like you need to look at something fuzzy, hey Aubrey, let us know in the chat, and we can check in on Victor to see the progress he's making in his very, very fine work. All right. Again, if you're just joining, please hit the like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm to bring more people in. We'd love to have more people join us. And let's talk a little bit about guests. So, Chris, if you could just quickly describe what is a use case for bringing guests into Confluence, just so we all know what we're talking about and why a team might want to do this.
I think that the primary use case is collaboration. Basically, you need to have people joining in on your project, people who are not a part of your organization or maybe just a Confluence site, but you need to bring them in to work on a specific project, specific task, specific release, specific documentation page. And you don't want to give them seat for specific reasons, which we'll touch in a minute. And obviously, anonymous access is not a solution to collaboration on Confluence. So yeah, these are guests. They come in, they stay, and then they will leave, hopefully.
Hopefully they will leave. That's actually one of the major things we're going to talk about today is the leaving part of guests. And this is actually based on, and I'm going to drop it in the chat, a really great edition of our monthly dose of Confluence newsletter that we publish monthly. Chris is our main contributor to that. Some fantastic content. And in this issue, Chris, you had a really great quote from Benjamin Franklin, of all people, that at first, when I asked Rovo to have a look at your article, to help plan the live stream, and it like put this thing in here about stinky fish, and I was like, what? What is this in reference to? But what is the full quote again, Chris?
I'll quote: "Guests like fish begin to smell after 3 days."
Okay, I really love this. So if you have not, oh, and by the way, to answer the question, Victor is a lop-eared rabbit. I want to say, I can't remember what breed lop he is. Very saggy bunny. He weighs 6 pounds, which I don't know what that is in kilos. I want to say, is that 3 kilos?
2.8, perhaps.
Yeah. So he's a pretty big bunny, and soft as all get out. So soft. So I will just show you very quickly, just so y'all know how you enable guests. Just so you all can see it really quickly. Here I am. I am Aziza, our administrator here, and I am in Confluence administration. So this is a Confluence only feature, or at least this bit. So I'm just going to go to, I could either go to security here, or I can just search. And here is where I can enable guest. It might be in security. Let's see. Interesting. There it is. Guest access. So this is the area where guests can be added. And I guess this now links out to, this links out to a part of administration. Oh, interesting. Okay. All right, so this is where an admin would, in fact, add a guest to our org. So, Chris, guests as a service. Why, like, practically, this feature, tell me about, like, how would a team use guests?
Well, I touched upon the major use case, or really broad use case, of having collaborators on your team who are not a part of your wider Confluence or Atlassian organization team.
Mm-hmm.
But as a service, as a Confluence feature, I think that we can trace it back to the old days when the only way how to collaborate on Confluence content was either to add users or use a third-party tool, or open your space to anonymous access and enable editing, which is something that's really, really not recommended. And if you compare Confluence from the yesteryear with content management systems, there always was a role that kind of allowed external collaboration, or collaboration with people who do not have a seat on the tool. So, for example, if I go back to my technical writing and technical documentation world, with these purpose-built content management systems or authoring system, you have seats for authors, and then you have seats for reviewers. And typically the license is tied to the number of writers, and reviewers are optional. But Confluence didn't have any sort of equivalent to the reviewer account. So guests fit nicely into that scope, that really you need to bring somebody else who doesn't have a seat. Now, obviously, we cannot compare Confluence to those dedicated CMS systems, because the pricing per seat is just way too different. But the principle remains the same. So essentially, use cases: bring somebody else in to work on your project without relying on third-party tool, or without adding them as a regular user, because this would impact your licensing. Obviously, we know how Confluence licensing and app licensing works. You add a user, you may go over a threshold of your pricing tier. If you are on annual plan, there might be other complications, not to mention the fact that you have apps installed on your Confluence.
Right.
They are priced per user. So you might be reluctant to add somebody in if it messes up with your financial planning, your bills, and what have you. So guess to me is a logical conclusion to a very common problem of external collaboration.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned, like, other content management systems, because I have lived that life as well. And typically these systems are very geared toward the main authors, right? Who often are also the admins of these systems, or at least the power users. And only when something like Google Docs hit the world and everyone was like, whoa, like collaboration online, like this is crazy talk. And I think then a lot of these systems were sort of like, there was a shoehorned in feature to allow guests like this, guest collaborators. And typically what that means for organizations is significant cost. These licenses are so costly. Additional administration burden because it's like a really specialized system, and either that team or maybe your larger organization admin has to go into this obscure system and like add or remove people. And then there's training, like the onboarding of like, okay, welcome to our very obscure content management system. Like, here are the ways that you edit and access and things. So, guest is a really nice answer to that. And we'll talk about some of the nice things that Atlassian did when implementing the feature. We'll do a little bit of math. But before we do, if you all have joined us, please do hit the like button. That sends good vibes to YouTube. Also, thanks for subscribing. It's nice to have you joining. Yes, Ada. Victor says hi back. He actually doesn't say hi back, but it's very cute right now. We're not going to get anything done on this stream, I'm pretty sure. But Victor is. Actually, rabbits are incredibly clean animals. He's litter trained, and like, he's probably cleaner than I am, which, I don't know what to say about that. I'm just saying. Chris, let's talk a little bit about pricing, because I think one of the things that somebody might bring up here is like, oh, well, like, if I want to just like have Confluence and then like just bring in other people that I'm not paying for per se, I could just like sign up for like a free Confluence site or something. Like, talk to me about the different options. And then of course we want to keep in mind, like, in an enterprise, what is not just like a hack, but what is like, we move into those best practices that large organizations need when they're thinking about bringing in guests. So talk to me about a little bit about all of this. Okay. Terrible question. I'm queuing you up with a terrible question. Go for it.
So, Confluence comes with different pricing tiers, and obviously the free version doesn't have free guests because, well, there's no such a thing as a free lunch. And if you have free Confluence, you are already having a free lunch. So adding free users to your free users doesn't make any sense. So guests are only available for paid for tiers, the standard, premium, and enterprise. There's a limit. You can only invite 5 guests per a paid user, and that phrase, and there's a limit how much guests you can add. But the first version of documentation that was like changed only recently was really ambiguous. And I had a lot of conversations with people, even fellow Atlassian champions, and we basically were divided into 2 camps. The first group had legitimate reason to say that the limit is your license limit. So if you have, 25 to 50 users license, and you have 30 users, you can only add 20 guests because the 50 is your pricing tier, and that's your limit. And the other group said that, the limit is actually the maximum capacity of users that are supported on that specific pricing tier in terms of standard, premium, and enterprise. And the wording was really ambiguous, and it could be read in these 2 different ways. I was always in a camp that subscribed to the interpretation that the limit is the actual site limit that's allowed in Confluence as such. Currently, if I remember correctly, it's $250,000.
Yes,
which is the size of Venice in Italy. Yep. But the limit actual of 5 guests per paid user still stands. So there is a limit, the hard limit, no matter how many people you have. So if you have, I don't know, 25 to 50 user license or pricing tier, and you have 30 users, you can add 150 guests. That's your limit. In the other interpretation of the policy, if you have 45 users, paid users, you would only be able to add 5 guests. If you have 50, you're out of luck, which would basically just delete the guest option from your tool set. And that feature would just stop making sense. So again, I did test this in practical terms.
Yes.
I was never reprimanded by Atlassian for breaking these rules. And if you look at the new version of documentation for guests that is available in Atlassian documentation site, now even the link sends you to the pricing tiers, and the user limit is 250,000. So
Fascinating. Okay, so all right, so I've brought up my screen. I've got the good old fashioned Google search calendar here, or calculator. So you're saying if my organization has let's say we have 100 paid Confluence users, that means we just multiply the number by 5 to find out how many guests we can invite. So in this case, we can do 500. But what we should do is figure out what is the equation for figuring out what the max number, like if I'm like, I just want to, like I want to get the max value. So how many users in Confluence can I have where the number of users and max guests does not blow up the user limit? This is not important for any practical reason. I'm just so curious now, but we're not going to disrupt the live stream with my silly math. Okay, that would get us to 60,000. We're getting there. Anyway, so Chris, talk to me a little bit about apps, because some folks might have Atlassian Marketplace apps. If they have Atlassian Marketplace apps, what even can guests do? I think that's maybe something that maybe we should clarify. What can they do with normal Confluence, and what can they do? Can they even use apps?
Yes, and depends. In Confluence, a guest can have pretty much any set of permissions as a regular users, with several exceptions. I think there are restrictions on management and these sort of things, but they can add pages, delete pages. They can behave as a normal user in a single space, because a guest can only access a single space at a time, and that means that they won't, for example, if you are using Sync Block or Excerpt or Page Include that's coming from a different space, they won't be able to see that because they don't have permissions to view content in that other space. They're physically bound to a single space at a time. You can remove them and assign them to a different space. That's fine, but then they won't be able to access the one that they had access to previously.
Got it.
To apps, I had a funny situation in my previous setup where I had a workflow app and space synchronization app. So the way how it was set up was, if you approve a page, it gets synced to a different space automatically. So a guest was able to approve a page using a marketplace app, but synchronization wasn't triggered. And the reason for that was that user who triggered synchronization by approving a page didn't have permissions in the target space. So effectively, Confluence permission setup ensured that the person who doesn't have access to the other space because they're guest won't be able to do any damage, even publishing, even using automation to make things happen in that other space. It was strictly limited to a single space, which I think is a clever thing in terms of managing guests and making sure that they won't just roam freely around your site.
Yeah.
It is restricting in a way if you want to have a broader collaboration, but on the other hand, if you want that and you want a person to access multiple spaces, then you should make them a regular user. So that trade-off actually makes perfect sense because it works for the main use case that guests as features as a feature was set up in the first place. So yeah, the usage of apps depends on what the app can access. But if the app's functionality is limited to a single space, and there aren't specific restrictions built within the app, they should be able to use that.
Okay. Okay. So just so everyone knows, I'm going to just show. First of all, Victor is literally trying to eat the bunny cam right now, so we're gonna see how much longer this can we can have Victor with us before I have to put my camera up before it gets eaten completely by a rabbit. I'm sure the visual of like having a rabbit mouth open and eating the camera is probably adorable, but yeah, Victor's doing his thing. Anyway, I wanted to show. So here I am. I am Maggie. I'm going to go into my space where I am an admin. I'm going to go to space settings here. And one thing to know about guests is they first need to be invited by a site admin, I believe. And then once they are invited, then you can add them to a space. That's my understanding. Is that right, Chris? Now I'm like, uh-oh, am I saying the wrong thing? I believe that's how it works. Users. Filtering for guests. I don't currently have a guest. So when I go to add...
Funny thing about that, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I added you to my personal Confluence yesterday, and I could see you here, which worked. But on the previous screen, it still said there are no guests in my Confluence. So probably a bug, but that was my my experience. I checked this morning and it was still the case. You were a guest here, but not on the other screen. So
fascinating. That could be because they're rolling out roles right now. Roles are in beta and they're like, we're getting toward those being GA someday over the rainbow. Interesting. Yeah, Kythera says you can also configure the default space that guests are added to, which is cool. Like if you know, as an admin, if you're like, we have one big project that or space that people are typically in. Yeah. Burnett wonders, can guests use search, Chris? I think I know the answer.
I think they can, but it would be limited to that single space.
Yes. Yeah, the nice thing is, Burnett, the same permissions model that applies across all of Confluence works here too. So they are still users, and they can only be in a single space, and they'll be able to search the things in that space. And they can, within the space, you give them the same sorts of permissions that you would. So to complete the thought, when you add guests to your space, especially the modern approach here is using roles. So you would give your guests whichever role in the space you want them to have. So for example, if your space, maybe you're working on a project with a third party and you want the space to just be informational, right? You might just give them the viewer role, which is basically they can just look at stuff in the space and they can also watch pages or watch content items. So if they're updated, they'll get notifications. But if you want to truly work with them, you can add them as collaborators. I'm not sure there's an instance where I would add guests as admins in the space. That seems like a terrible idea. And that's actually what we'll talk about in a little bit, is more around there's lots of things you can do, but when we're working in enterprise, there's very few things we should do because we want our information security team to feel comfortable with this feature. Because as soon as you start to say, oh, well, we'll just open things up to guests, some admins are like, oh, no, please don't do that. So talk to me a little bit about what are some policies that maybe organizations should think about if they're like, yeah, we want to work on projects or we want to have people co-writing on our documentation who aren't usually in Confluence, maybe people inside the organization, maybe people outside. What should teams be what should organizations be thinking about?
Depends mostly on the fact that what mostly on how many regulations you have internally, if there are any compliance regulations you need to be conforming to. I wouldn't say there is a like a single policy that applies, but there are some sort of housekeeping rules that you should always sort of keep in mind when adding somebody external to your Confluence site. And it, regardless, if you are if you need to comply with ISO or SOC2 requirements, just the basic. I'm lost for words here, but like you don't have to be enterprise. Even if you're a small organization, you still
Right.
need to have some policies for managing guests. Otherwise, you will end up with a nightmare of accounts that are no longer valid but still have access. And when you are repurposing, let's say, spaces, I guess 2 years ago had access to and they still have, then you might expose information to somebody else, that aren't just not supposed to see. So
So,
that said, there will be a couple of house rules, like define the project, specifically
mm,
what the project does, which guests will be participating in it, determine the space the guest would have access, permissions, time frame. Good idea would be to have somebody, especially if you're inviting more people as guests, who would be a touch point or a hub to which those guests would go if they have an issue, so they don't immediately raise an issue with an admin. Essentially manage them as a group, as a responsible adult in a room, rather than having them raise the same issue all over again with an admin. So that's sort of like a basics that you should always adhere to when you are working with external collaborators.
yeah, and let's. I want to just address a comment that Kaithera made in chat. Kaithera, it's great to have you here. That it's kind of baffling. There's no built-in way to disable access if like a user doesn't log in for a certain amount of time. I believe, Kaithera, that might be a feature in Atlassian. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name. What were we looking at,
Guard,
Chris? Guard. Thank
guard.
you. Guard. Thank you. Thank you. Atlassian Guard and Atlassian Guard Premium. This is Atlassian's enterprise solution for managing security policies. So you can build up different ways to flag different things. For example, you could create a policy, a user login policy that says like if users don't log in, I believe that's a feature. There's a lot of user management features. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really important if you're working with compliance needs, if you have a security certification, which we'll talk a little bit more of that in a minute, but that is really important. Also, we had a question from Burnett. Does a space have to be public to have guests, Chris, or can it be limited to within my to being just within my organization? But can we make guests without using licenses that can view the content in the space? That's a good question. And maybe, Chris, let's talk about some of the different use cases teams use guests. There will like use this guest feature for, and then I think we can kind of answer that question as we talk about it.
Okay, well, we touched on the main theme of collaboration. I
Right.
was a guest once in a K15T space before I joined,
Mm-hmm.
and Shannon, our head of marketing, she was working with me on a customer success story, and I was invited as a guest to work on that topic. So I got an invite, I joined, and to my surprise and kind of a relief, she created a dedicated space for this project, meaning that I wouldn't be able to see anything else, just a tiny little patch of K15T Confluence environment,
Mm-hmm.
which was really prudent. and something that should be probably observed, like create a dedicated space for guests, so they don't access content that they're not supposed to see by accident, for example. So
Yep.
that was cool. You might work with a client on your documentation, like they request a specific feature, and you want to work with them. Also, you can have contractors in your Confluence as guests, either for specific projects or even long term. But they are contractors, and for whatever reason, you don't want to make them permanent users.
Yep.
Compliance documentation. You might be working, or anything else that requires external subject matter expert. I don't know, a patent attorney or compliance lawyer who would join your Confluence and work on implementation of a specific compliance requirement within your company. I mean, possibilities are endless. Wherever you
Yeah.
need to work with somebody who is external to your company, then invite them as a guest. It's much better to use guests as a feature, because you can control the content, you can control access, compared to, I don't know, sending Word documents over email, or using Google services, or any other file sharing, or collective editing platform.
Chris, you
So to
didn't
speak.
even mention formatting the content as a PowerPoint file and sending it to people. I've heard that from some content creators, that that's what their stakeholders ask for, and I'm like, or they want a printed PowerPoint that they then highlight and then hand back to you.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. And I have a question for you on like more like large scale use case, but just to come back to the question, no, you do not need to set your space to be publicly available. That feature is older. It's called anonymous access. And Chris and I will talk a little bit more about our feelings about anonymous access. And so we will get to that, but no, it does not have to be publicly open. And like Chris was just talking about, you could say, hey, like our legal team, they're not working in Confluence, but we do need them to review this content or these policies, so we can give them guest access within a single page. They still have to log in. There's still that requirement, but they don't have like full paid Confluence licenses, which is great for just such things. Now, Chris, this makes me wonder, because we're talking about public access and things, and we get a lot of guest licenses. So should I use guests if like my team has a knowledge base and we want to like have it be private just for, say, our customers? So like, should I give all of my customers guest login, like invite them as guests in a space? Is that a good idea? Like just like large scale deployment of guests?
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, good. You're welcome. Good luck.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, on the Riderdocs Slack community, there was somebody who had a question, and when we sort of broke it down, it turned out that they were actually using a Confluence on a data center, and they had, I think, 2,000 users just from their customers. So they were giving their customers a regular user account to access documentation in Confluence. So I guess that providing your documentation is in a single space, which probably would be for specific users, then yes, that seems like a plausible and possible use case, that you have, I don't know, again, depending on how many customers you have, because I can imagine that if your customer base is in millions, then you're out of luck on the guest account. But specific users with specific access to specific spaces, I mean, guests would probably work on that. They would be able to interact with your content. Maybe it's not ideal, because if you have that many thousand guests, joining your Confluence. I mean, it can be managed, obviously, but it could create some sort of a headache for your admin. I mean, there are
Yeah.
different ways how to make your Confluence documentation accessible to your customers without anonymous access, hint, scroll sites, and SSO access.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, that would be possible, I guess.
So I wanted to just quickly address, there was a question in the chat about can guests, can they view knowledge base articles from JSM? So the interesting, we'll say, thing about the knowledge base functionality in JSM is it's actually a distinct permissions and user management thing in the teamwork graph world. So yes, you could have a single space that you have guests in, and you have set it up as a knowledge base for JSM. That said, JSM can actually connect to multiple spaces, and guests can only be turned on, or someone who is a guest can only be in one. That said, the permissions and the access for JSM people is different than the access for guests. So again, like, yes, you can kind of rig it together and everybody can have access, but it's a different access, and it might be just headachy with admins. And we're gonna talk more about this, because this is where the rubber meets the road with something like this. Is, we've had questions about anonymous access. Should I open up the space, or do I have to open up the space for everybody on the internet? We have feelings about that. There's also public pages is another functionality in Confluence where you can share a live doc or a page just publicly. You can also do that with whiteboards. Whiteboards can also be publicly accessible, and we'll talk about that. I believe that's the only question that we haven't answered so far. So Chris, in your article, and I really resonated with this because in a past life I was a project manager. The zombie problem. If guests are just used, the feature's turned on, and I just invite people to random spaces, what are some of the issues that can occur in our organizations in regard to, like, I don't have any policies, I don't have any process, we're just using the feature because it's convenient, but we didn't really think about what might happen or how it might put us, our project, our customers, or our entire enterprise at risk?
So say you have a space for a project, or even a documentation space, and you invite somebody from your partner, or you're working on a solution with an integration solution. So let's say you're working with Salesforce, and you invite them, a couple of people from the team, to your Confluence to work on documentation or a specific project, and you grant them access. Project ends, they still remain as guests, you're moving on, and then you have a different integration solution with a different company. So invite them again. You invite a bunch of people as guests into that same space, not realizing that the original Salesforce bunch still has access to, and you might be exposing identities of these people. You might be exposing the content, the new content that's not supposed to be seen by anybody else but your company and your new partner. Essentially, you are exposing your content to other people who sort of linger because you didn't offboard them from your environment.
Yeah.
And that to me is one of the biggest risks that you can endure. That's why creating a specific space for a specific project is so important, even if you need to then synchronize or copy content to your main space. But even if the zombie problem happens, you still have that physical boundary that any guest no guest can cross.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned like the done project amnesia, which I have experienced, which is like, and actually like scientifically, when we complete something as humans, we get a huge dopamine rush and we're like, yeah, I did it. And then there's a rush of the other thing where you kind of like, it's sort of a down sort of feeling and you sort of forget and you so like as a project manager, I have been like, yeah, ship the project, crack a beer, whatever, celebrate, and then never clean up the space. Never. The other thing is like some teams archive things, but just because you archived pages or something doesn't mean those guests don't still have access to that space. Unless you are purposeful about this, they still have access. Talk to me a little bit about the missing expiration date problem that you mentioned.
Well, it's similar to a zombie problem. They basically the guests linger, your project space lingers. Those people still have access to, and I mean, imagine that you're working on even if you create a specific space for a specific group of guests, you have multiple of them. You are a small team. You may get over that 5 guests per user threshold if you're not careful. So to prevent this, just have a guest policy, even if you're not, if you don't have to comply with compliance requirements, just have a policy on define the project, define that responsible person, define the end date, and what else? Offboarding. The whole offboarding procedure, like what is the definition of done for that project? If you're working with guests, should always contain some provision for dealing with people who are external to a company, because otherwise, yeah, as you said, like project ends and yeah, hooray, and we forget about it and we move on. But there's this administrative burden that you need to like carry till the end, and I mean, I won't name the company, but they're within the Atlassian environment, and they didn't decommission a user properly. So the person who left company 3 years ago, their name is still there publicly displayed, and it's just it's probably a regular user. But again, if you don't have this for regular users, you maybe not have this for guests, which are sort of like a lower tier of users. So just be careful about like decommissioning and then basically putting whoever doesn't have to be there out of your site. That's just put bluntly, but that's the policy that you should follow.
And I want to ask you a little more about onboarding and offboarding, because I think this is a real, especially in this world where a lot of us are feeling pressure to just say like, we'll just learn on the job, absolutely a terrible attitude. If you hear that from any leader of yours, be like, no, that's not how we do things. That's how really bad mistakes are made and the organization is put at risk. But before we do that, Trisha wants to know what kind of music you're into. Chris, we're noticing a guitar in the background.
That's a headless Steinberger or Steinberger, depending on your persuasion to English pronunciation of Steen or Stein. But mostly rock and light forms of heavy metal.
Okay, and we're curious. Do you have a SoundCloud or anything? Anywhere where we can hear you music or support you?
No, I've been too busy with weekly and monthly dose of Confluence, so I don't really have time.
All right, fine. All right, my dream is that like even when Chris isn't a speaking guest on the stream, he can just be doing background accompaniment the whole time. That would be incredible. And we'll have a little tip jar thing, Chris, with requests. And by the way, if anyone's wondering, oh no, Victor, you've moved. Our guest, now he's at my feet again. Well, Victor is sleeping again, if you're wondering. He'll make it back on. Someone said, I frequently run into problems when I have to add guests that have had a full Confluence license on a different site, not managed by us. Any advice? I'm curious, what are the problems that you've had? There is a difference. So all users have an Atlassian account. If they have created an Atlassian account, and there is a concept in user management, whether it is a enterprise managed account or not. And again, if your enterprise is using tools like Guard, there are policies they can apply to managed and unmanaged users. So that can be an element. If your enterprise is using Guard, you might run into a policy violation where they're like, no, you cannot add anybody who's not managed if they're not in a managed Atlassian account. Chris, have you run into this or tested this? I can't say that I have, where you're like, oh, I want to invite Chris. I invited his email, but you have an existing Atlassian account. Like, to me, I'm like, oh, it should just add you as a guest in my site. But have you run into issues? They said, especially if they have a deactivated user.
Okay. So I invited you yesterday with your K15T account to my private Confluence, and it's just a plain Confluence, and you were able to join.
Yes.
And your account is managed. It's an Atlassian account that's managed. That's one thing.
But not deactivated.
No, you fully activated. Now, the rule for guests is that if you have multiple sites on your Atlassian organization, so you have Confluence A and Confluence B, and per license agreement, you're not supposed to invite user from Confluence A as a guest to Confluence B, because they already have an account in your organization. In other words, if somebody has an account within your Atlassian organization, you should not be adding them as a guest to a Confluence. However, it is possible. You shouldn't, but it's technically possible. Don't ask me how I know that, but so that's probably a loophole, or it cannot be. I can imagine that this cannot be really resolved the hard way. But you would be breaking a license agreement. So I can imagine that if the user is deactivated, but they still sort of linger somewhere, maybe this sort of kicks in. But I don't have personal experience with that happening. But again, there could be, as you said, there could be other factors at play. For example, if you're using Guard and you're commissioning users to your Confluence through your SSO. There's also all sorts of issues at play.
I think unfortunately, like, let's say Victor has a deactivated user account, I would probably, like you said, it's going to be problematic. It's not going to work completely because they already have a user that exists. So I'm guessing you would have to reach out to Atlassian support to ask them who can activate this account, because I think the account would need to be activated so then the person can log into the account, so then they can be added as a guest. That is a very interesting question, and I don't even know who on the Confluence team I would ask for like clarification on it. Unfortunately, I have too much time. I do have one other question, Chris, from Matza, who is currently running a Confluence data center, like a community license for about 100 users. And Atlassian just announced that nonprofits can have a 25 user license for free. Since the volunteers that are working in this Confluence instance, they don't log in all that much, would this be a good use case for guests?
We reaching the free territory. Because I don't have experience with the 25 user license that's free, because it sort of falls within the special category of community use or NGO use. I don't know. I mean, if guests are supported on that license, then of course that would be a perfect use case, because you have the core staff that's using the site on day-to-day basis, and then you have guests who log in once in a while to work on a specific project or add, I don't know, field update once in a month. The question is, like, at which point, because in theory you can add 125 guests for 25 user license. Like, at which point does it become sort of a abuse of having it for free? So I don't know. This needs to be tested. Maybe either ask Atlassian if this is okay, if guests are allowed, or if ask for forgiveness.
Uh,
I don't know. There's it's like to me it's a great territory because you're getting something for free and you want to add more for users. So
yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. All right, Chris. So we're running out of time, and I want to talk about onboarding and offboarding.
That was data center, or was it?
Well, Matze is on data center right now, but thinking of switching to the 25 user cloud allowance. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've just lost my thought. So tell me, or that's what it was. I wanted to say this guest access thing, unfortunately, it's not Teamwork Collection wide. Okay. All of the apps in the Teamwork Collection have different sort of sharing mechanisms. Like I said, Confluence has a few. And I'm hoping we can talk briefly about anonymous access. But Chris, especially because like if I'm a project manager, I can't, there's no guest access to Jira projects in quite the same way, or Jira spaces, I should say. So kind of if I invite a guest to a Confluence space that's all about my project, what sort of things should I be doing for onboarding and then offboarding, both like our process, but also things that I need to communicate to this user so they can kind of understand like, what is this thing I just logged into? What's important to do there, because this is, in many ways, this is probably the key to using guests properly, is informing everybody of what's going on.
If they don't have any experience with Confluence, obviously you need to give them a crash course in like how to use that, make it as simple as possible. So use pages, don't bother maybe with live docs, something that they would be more familiar with. Yeah, make your edits, save the page or publish the page, and it's done. Then you can log in at any point and work on it. You can, how to work with history, just don't worry about something happening. But the Confluence is so, like the learning curve for the basic is so favorable to new users that
yes,
you don't really need to spend much time on that. I mean, if you're only working with text-based content, then it's super easy. If it's something more advanced, like introduce them to macros. But if they are not really techie person, then just use text and then you can do the formatting yourself. But I mean, this is your basic onboarding for as a tech user, and because they cannot do much, maybe just show them how to organize pages if it's something they would be working on on their own, so they have some sort of a system. But other than that, in terms of onboarding, there's not too much to do. Your responsibility as somebody who's inviting people to Confluence as guests is have some sort of a Confluence database. We have a name, a space they're assigned to. This can all be found in the actual Confluence settings, but just make sure that you personally know that this is a person that was invited to this project. They're working on this area, and this is where they need to be offboarded. Just for your information to be in control of who you're working with. So if admins ask you, like, okay, so we invited this person, what's the status? You can tell them, yes, we're going to offboard them in 2 weeks. It sort of it gives you better overview of your projects where you're working with guests. Basically.
I love this, especially if you aren't using a tool like Guard that is helping you sort of automatically manage your policies. Yeah, having that reminder to, like, here's all your lists, and maybe even set up a recurring reminder that's like, in 6 months when this project is supposed to end, go and see if I should remove these people from the space. Somebody in the chat, Brian in the chat just said guest accounts are rolling out to Jira this month, Chris. That's pretty
I
cool.
heard about that a couple of months ago, and I think it's been sort of like de de-announced.
Uh-oh.
And
Uh-oh.
yeah, it's if it's coming back, then yes, because it would solve a lot of questions that people were were looking for answers to.
Speaking of answers, Chris, Victor was curious if he worked for an enterprise that, and we only have just a few minutes, so I know there's a lot to
Okay.
talk about here. If his organization is using ISO or SOC 2 certifications, and maybe maybe the data security team is tempted to just be like, nope, no guest access, like absolutely not. We're just going to say no immediately. What is that the best approach, or are there things that teams can work on with their information security teams to figure out if guests can actually work within the organization versus just shutting it all down? And like again, especially in realms where guard is not in place, how do you communicate not only to the admin, but if you are going to use guests, how do you communicate that to other people on the team?
So these makeshift solutions using databases for guest management or just making sure that everything's in order, it's sort of like a poor man's compliance. Essentially, this is for your own overview. Now, obviously, if you are a big organization or enterprise user, or you have a large premium site, you would have these processes in place for onboarding, offboarding users. Now, these compliance documents that you mentioned or standards, they do not specifically say that you cannot use guests on Confluence.
Right.
What they deal with is telling you what criteria you must meet in order to invite external collaborators to whatever projects you have. And then it comes to like proper onboarding, proper offboarding, proper bookkeeping, and these sort of things. And it can get extremely complex. Now, can it be managed? Yes. However, as an admin, you are kind of responsible for whatever happens on the systems you're in charge of, and
Right.
not to mention the fact that if you're a compliance officer. Now, you can build a set of rules, a set of processes that would make your organization fully compliant to work with Confluence guests as a feature, even if you are, I don't know, a government agency. The problem is that to meet all these criteria, you need a human somewhere in the chain to do the right thing. And the reason many admins like ban the feature or other features like anonymous access and public links is that you cannot control every single human 24/7. And if that person doesn't fill in the report at a specific time or doesn't do something at a specific time, things would pile up, and it's then admin's responsibility. So it happens once, okay, happens twice, maybe, but it
Yes.
happens like if this is something that is happening on a regular basis, they might as well say like, okay, sorry guys, no guest access, because to police that is so resource heavy, and we had so many close calls, and we have questions raised by, I don't know, auditors, that it's just not worth the risk and effort to make sure that that everything works properly.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not like they don't want people to collaborate. It's just that the administrative burden is so high that it's just not worth the effort. That's the sad conclusion.
It is this. It is the sad conclusion, and yeah, we've all worked in organizations, or even in have you ever heard of like, well, we're all getting punished because of your mistake situations. These happen, and I get it. At the end of the day, maintaining a secure environment means saying no to things that would be very convenient. Chris, I know you have thoughts, and not even really a hot take on anonymous access. Also, probably thoughts on public pages, but we don't have time to talk about that. Where would people find those thoughts, Chris? Because I know you just recently have talked about it.
Well, k15t.com, rock the docs. That's sort of like a knowledge or learning site. The guest article is there, and spoiler alert, I'm working on 2 articles that concern anonymous access. should be published in the maybe next 14, 21 days. So do check out the site. And yeah, thank you for spending this hour with us.
Absolutely, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. It has been phenomenal. Thank you, Victor, for joining us for the very first time. If y'all want more bunny content, just throw bunny or something into the chat and we'll make sure Victor joins us. I think to be compliant, I need to say like no animals were harmed in the making of this live stream. I think that's important. Yeah, like Chris said, hop over to k15t.com/learn to read all of the fantastic content Chris and others have written. You can also subscribe to the Monthly Dose newsletter. So you're going to get so much information from us, including news about stuff that's happening in the Teamwork Collection and all of our best practice thoughts as we think them. Please do subscribe on YouTube as well, as we are doing so many live streams right now. We've done a bunch about robo agents and things, which we've had tons of interest on. I foresee many more in the future. So please do join us as we continue to explore how to use Confluence to share what you do best. Thanks for joining. Bye, everybody.